Jeff Russo, you've scored the new FX show Fargo, which is based on or inspired by the 1996 film of the same name. So that film was scored by the Coen brothers' frequent collaborator Carter Burwell. So how much did you try to draw on his work, or did you try to set your own version of Fargo apart?
I I watched the movie. I sort of tried to get into that same world. Carter's score is very iconic and wonderful. Um, but I felt like we really needed to write all new melodies and all new vibe for our show, which in order to forge our own identity was sort of really important. We didn't want to draw too heavily on it, and I don't think that we drew too heavily on any of it. Just all we really did was draw from the vibe of the film. The way you feel when you see the film is sort of like what we wanted to get across when you watch the show, with a whole new cast of characters and all new themes and all new everything.
Do you know what episode you submitted for Fargo for Emmy consideration?
I do. I think it's episode 1. I think
Okay.
it's the pilot. It's the introduction to the world of Fargo, the television series, and I thought it was a really good um, representation of what the show would become musically. And strangely enough, it's like as I continued to write the rest of the season, because I had to choose which one to submit before we were done recording all of the episodes. Um, I realized like, oh, episode 6 is really great, and episode 9 has some really great stuff in it. And so it's sort of unfortunate that you have to only submit one episode for consideration, as opposed to being able to consider the entire series as music, because for this type of show, I treated it really like a movie, so you can hear the change in the subtleties of the characters in the music as it goes. So a cue that you hear in episode 1 is really different by the time you get to episode 10. There's some of the same themes exist, but my interpretation of those themes have changed over time. We don't just I can't just copy myself as we go across 10 episodes, because I know people who will watch all 10 episodes straight, like a movie, or 6 and 4, or 7 and 3, or whatever. So it would be interesting for people to sort of look at it from a whole perspective, like, for the whole series. But I do think that the first episode is definitely very indicative of where that music is going, and it definitely sets the tone musically for the entire season. So it is a really great representation of it.
Although I do feel like the first episode is missing the wrench and numbers theme, which is so good.
Well, one of the things, it was fun. One of the things that we talked about was to begin episode 2 with something completely unexpected. We have these 2 new characters that we're introducing in episode 2, and which is odd for a television series. Like, a lot of times, in the pilot, they're like, get it all in there, let's make sure we know who every character is. And we didn't do that. We saved those 2 very fundamentally important characters for the second episode. So we wanted to give them a very special introduction, and hence the wrench and numbers theme, which is basically just rocking out on drums.
Yeah.
And yeah, would I have liked that to have been in the first episode, or to maybe have used the second episode? Yeah, maybe. But I made a choice that I think had to be made, and I feel like we're still covered. We're still like, it's still a part of the whole world.
So another new series that you did this year was Hostages for CBS.
Yeah.
And the music on that one is not so intrusive. It's more used to underscore the action. So how do you approach a show like that compared to something like Fargo? And is it less fun, or do you still find plenty of room to innovate?
I feel like every project stands on its own merits, in terms of how much fun or how artistic I can be. You just have to find how to do that within the confines of every project. Hostages, there's a lot of music. It was 36, 38 minutes of music a week, and and that's the way those types of shows really work. You know, they work with all of this action music sort of underscoring everything, but don't really get in the way. Whereas in a show like Fargo, the music really does make more of a statement, and we use it in that way, from making an emotional statement, or making a statement of tension, or making a statement of pressure on the characters. But we use so much less music in Fargo than on really on any other show that I've ever done, and that to me makes the impact of the music way greater. But they all sort of have their own thing. I mean, I loved doing Hostages because it's so much fun to sort of really amp up tension by using all this percussion and all these pulsing and all these synths and all these string lines. It was a lot of fun.
How many minutes per episode of Fargo would you say you have music in then?
Fargo's probably just under 20. I think our most might have been 22. We averaged about 17.
So do you have a lot of direction when you're recording music, or do you have any rules that you set yourself that you try to abide by?
Well, on Fargo, I wrote many of the themes in advance of the show, like as I was reading scripts, because we really wanted to treat it more like a movie. You know, one of the things that Noah, who's the showrunner, told me that he wanted was to treat this like a 10-hour movie. So to do that, there had to be these really rich, really big themes that were already ready to go as we were getting into, you know, post-production of the show. Whereas on Hostages, you know, the thing is, okay, so here's the turnover of the show. You have 4 days to finish. So a lot of times that means your first idea is the idea. You know, there's not a lot of time to get to that second idea until somebody says, you know, this one cue, this isn't really working that much. Although that didn't really happen very often on Hostages. That's sort of, you just sort of write it and then wait for a note. You know.
So what would you say is distinctive about the Fargo score and how it's recorded?
Well, you know, like, one of the main distinctions is that we use a full orchestra, an all live orchestra. So the entire score is live instruments and real players, and it's really sort of important to get that cinematic quality, as opposed to Hostages, which was a completely electronic score. And both have their merits. You know, for Hostages, it was very necessary because there was so much music, and there was a lot of synthetic part of it, a big synthetic part of it, which made the score what it is.
So you worked with Noah Hawley, the showrunner for Fargo, on a couple of other series, but for something like Hostages, or even a new show called Power on Stars, I read that you sent in a demo for that one. So is that normally how like these things go? Do you audition like a high school talent show, or is it all just based on connections and like your past work?
Yeah, there's so many different ways. I mean, knowing people definitely helps, and who you know helps you get in the door. In terms of Power, you know, it was one of those things where I was asked to do a demo, and I did it along with probably 15 other composers. I actually don't know how many other composers were in on making the demo for the show. And then I got a call saying, they really liked your demo, you're hired. You know, it was one of those things. And I don't know that that's really the way it always goes. You know, with Hostages, I co-composed that with Ben Decter, another composer, and he and I both have a relationship with the showrunner from that show. We had worked with him prior, and I worked with him separately on a pilot that he directed called Meet Jane for Lifetime Network a couple of years ago, and Ben had scored a film that he had directed. So getting together us getting together and talking to him about doing that show was just a great way for us to be able to all three work together.
So switching over to your new show, Power, which is on Stars, as I mentioned. Now 50 Cent, he did the title theme for that one.
He did the main title and the end. I think he did the end title as well.
So I'm wondering, did you incorporate like his work into your own, or is it kind of difficult when it's already made and then?
Yeah, no, they didn't ask me to do that. There is an urban flavor to the score because that's just the nature of the show. But I didn't get to really listen to. I didn't even hear the main theme until we were already mixing the third episode or something.
So last question is, the plan for Fargo is to have a new cast and a new location every season as an anthology series. So do you have any plans to return for the second season?
My goal is to return if I'm asked. I'm hoping to return. This has been writing the music for Fargo has been really the highlight of everything I've done for film and or television, because I've gotten to write this music that I really enjoy writing and really love listening to. I grew up listening to a lot of classical music, and this sort of has just a monicum of that in it, and I feel that I would like to continue that vibe going forward. I have no idea what we will want the show to sound like if there is a season 2. I'm not really sure what's happening. I'm sure like the people up top are talking about whatever it is they talk about once a show's over, but I really don't have any insight into what season 2 might be, if anything at all.
Fair enough. Okay, well, thank you on behalf of Full Derby to take the time to talk to us, and good luck at the Emmys this summer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.